Hello, this is Joe Trahan, welcoming you to the All Me podcast from the Taylor Hooten Foundation, whose mission is to enlighten the world to the truths about appearance and performance-enhancing substances. As the national leader on this subject, they communicate their educational messages through various methods, including this podcast. Thank you for listening and enjoy the show.
Hi, and welcome to the All Me podcast. My name is Tavis Piatoli, sports dietitian for the Taylor Hooten Foundation, and today I'm going to be your host. When we think about monitoring hydration status, the average consumer may measure this by how many ounces of fluid they drink in a given day. Some general recommendations are half your body weight in ounces of water or fluid. But is this enough, and are there other ways we should be measuring if we're adequately hydrated? Did you know that the color of your urine can be a very effective way to determine hydration status? In this podcast, we speak with Dr. Floris Wardenaar, who is the director of the Athlete Lab at Arizona State University, to discuss the role of urine color and its impact on hydration status. We will also discuss his career path and why he chose the field of sports nutrition, his current research and methods he uses to assess urine color, why urine color is important, the urine color chart, and key aspects you need to know to stay hydrated. Dr. Wardenaar, thank you so much for joining us today on the All Me podcast. It's great to have you.
Yes, good to be here.
So we're going to have a very interesting topic today. We're talking about urine color and urine testing. And when you and I were talking about this topic, I was like, this is interesting. I would have never thought, this would be a topic of interest in something that we've done, or at least have had a lot of research on, especially on the color side. So before we dive into today's topic, I really want to learn a little bit more, and I want our listeners to learn a little bit more about you and your career path. What really got you interested in studying the field of sports nutrition?
I think I was 14 years old, and I was very much into cycling, road cycling, and I was doing races, and I was a small guy, and I was looking for something that really could, bring me the advantage, and I decided that for me that would be nutrition. And so from that moment on, I was really sold, looking into, okay, what can help, what can be effective. And I decided to start studying nutrition and dietetics when I went to college. I wanted to be a sports dietitian right away, and I wanted to work with our elite athletes that we have in the Netherlands, and especially because nutrition has the ability to improve sports performance. So yeah, after my bachelor's, I went into a master's of science in nutritional physiology, and directly after that, I started as a lecturer at the Han University of Applied Sciences in the Netherlands. And at the same time, I was working as a sports dietitian, a very young sports dietitian at the moment, with Olympic teams. I was lucky to start there. They had a good network, and they saw me as a talent, I think, and that allowed me to start working with a lot of athletes. In that period, I think I developed a lot of experience. I was working with many different teams. The only thing is, at the moment that we, as a sports dietitian, didn't really have the answer. We went to the scientists that we knew, asking the questions. And after, I think, 8 or 9 years, I really wanted to cross over, because I worked with the athletes. I liked that, but I really wanted to do more. So I wanted to become the one that people would ask questions at. So, and then I started to do my PhD. I started in 2012, and in 2017 I rounded it up, and I got a job offered at Arizona State University at the College of Health Solutions. So 5 years later, after that, I'm here in this podcast.
Excellent. Yeah, you've had a great career. I know you have a lot more that you still want to accomplish, and I want to learn a little bit more about the work you do at Arizona State. You're the director of the Athlete Field Lab. So can you tell us what's involved in that? What do you guys do at your lab?
Yeah, the focus of my lab is to define nutrition needs of athletes and active populations, and especially in a desert environment. As a sports nutritionist, I think you always need to make sure that you adapt to the environment that you work in. and going from the wet and relatively mild climate of the Netherlands to the Arizona desert, that's what it's about. So I really like to validate tools that can be used by practitioners, by sports nutritionists. So that means questionnaires, or for example, the use of tools that can help athletes to assess their own hydration status, like urine color.
We're here to talk about urine color, and I know we're going to get into that with a little bit about other types of research. I know one of the things you and I have kind of collaborated on in the past is dietary supplement safety. You just want to kind of mention a little bit about some of your interest in that level as well?
I have been sort of triggered by the fact that athletes use dietary supplements a lot, and that there is a pathway for safe supplement use, because many of your listeners will know that there's always the chance that supplements are contaminated or adulterated, and third-party testing is a good way to at least take responsibility and make sure that you do your homework. And what I found out looking at my data sets with the data that I collected is that there is, depending on the level and the type of athletes, there is a substantial portion of the athletes that reports not to make use of those third-party tested supplements. So I think what we need to do is learn more about their attitude and their behavior to understand what it makes them make those choices, so that we can tailor our recommendations, but also our guidance and our coaching towards those specific athletes. Because I think there is a lot of education out there, but I think it's not a one size fits all. And a part of my research is focusing on that behavioral aspect. Can we learn, who are those specific athletes, and what can we do to make sure that we guide them towards safer supplement choices in the future as well?
Yeah, that's going to be a very important topic in paper once you have the chance to release more about that information. So today we're diving into talking about testing urine and as a marker of hydration, assessing hydration status. So my first question, when we look at this, people, I guess the average consumer might not be thinking about, wow, I can use my urine as a way to know if I'm hydrated or not. But why is urine an effective way to measure hydration status?
Obviously, urine is a nice tool because we produce it normally every day. So that allows us to watch it every day as well. It's convenient. It's not expensive. It's a side product that we need to get rid of. So why not have a look at it? So one of the things is that the concentration of our urine reflects in a good way the general hydration status of the body. And low water intake itself results in a high or a higher urine concentration. So I think it's important to say that although urine in itself is an interesting measure to say something about your hydration status, there is not only one way to assess hydration status. The issue is that you basically need to combine multiple types of measurements to get a well-rounded idea about if you are well hydrated. So most of the time, I advise to combine at least two different forms of hydration assessment. So for example, looking at your urine color to say, okay, did I drink enough during the last 24 hours? That's a good thing. But maybe, for example, in combination with measuring body weight pre and post exercise, so that you have a better understanding about how much fluid did you lose, were you able to compensate that, and can you move forward the rest of the day in the right fluid balance.
So you just mentioned urine color, and that is perfect because my next question is specifically about urine color. So what does the color indicate? As I've seen various charts being used in locker rooms and during educational sessions. So how do we know urine color indicates, certain aspects of hydration?
In general, a light or a dark urine color provides a good indication of your hydration status, especially those two edges, like very light, probably you are proper hydrated, versus very dark, then probably you should drink more. The only thing is, if you look into the mean of things, let's say 50% of the cases are sort of around the average of being hydrated, yes or no. So especially in the middle, where the urine has some color, it's sort of hard to determine, is this now a good urine color? Am I well hydrated, or do I need to drink more? And that's, I think, where those urine color charts come in. And that's the nice thing, that they are existing out of multiple color shades. So that allows you to determine that those differences between those small steps in increment in your urine concentration. But the difficult part there is, if we look at it from a scientific way, that's where the misclassification may occur. If you start assessing your own urine color, if it is somewhere in between light and dark, then there is a risk of misclassification. And that's what that's what I try to fix, to better understand where that misclassification is coming from and how we can fix it.
Interesting. We look at urine color, and this is just kind of something that just came to thought. We consume a lot of products when we're hydrating. Is there something that, we could be consuming that might make us think we're hydrating, or might make our urine very clear and go, oh, I'm drinking a lot of this, but it could change the urine color and it could be a sign of dehydration?
I think overall, if you look at your urine color, it normally reflects the hydration status of the body over the last, let's say, 24 hours. It can be influenced, especially when you drink a lot of fluid in a short amount of time. We know that urine concentration at that moment is not reflective of the real hydration status. And as a result, urine color will not be reflective of that as well. I'm not sure if many different types of drinks will directly impact the color of your urine. There is all kind of buzz about it. For example, I think we all know that if you eat beets, red beets, beetroot, that it may color your urine a little bit red or reddish. There are some words that, for example, some of the B vitamins may change your color into, let's say, neon types of colors. It's funny. There's only, as far as I know, 2 studies that really did a clinical trial in which they assessed the impact of those different substances on urine color scoring, and there was not much came out of it. I think one study said that B2 may influence the urine color, and the other study didn't saw that effect. If I look at my own data, I collected a large data set, almost 200 people. And when I stratify that data set for people reporting the use of dietary supplements versus no dietary supplements, I don't see any difference between those 2 groups in their capacity to score urine color at all. I don't say that the substance itself, the supplement, is not influencing the color of their urine. But what I'm interested in is if people are still capable to accurately assess their hydration status based on their urine color. And I didn't see a difference there. So overall, I think jury is still out a little bit, but for urine color scoring itself as a means to assess hydration status, probably it doesn't really matter too much.
Excellent. Thank you for that explanation. Yeah, I know me personally, if I take a good quality B, multivitamin with a lot of B, it is that neon. It changes like within the next time I go to the bathroom. So, I think that could be alarming to some people, but I always tell people, look, if you're taking the B vitamin, don't get too concerned if it looks really like a darker yellow or neon yellow, because it'll really change that color. All right. So urine specific gravity. This is when I've worked in sports, I've worked with athletic trainers, sports dietitians. I've talked to other professionals looking at this test, when doing a hydration test. What are your thoughts on this test in regards to being a tool to assess hydration status?
Yeah, so urine specific gravity is based on the refractive index, and it looks at the ratio of the velocity of light in a solution. So if you have a urine specific gravity meter, it sends out light through the solution, and then when that light enters the liquid, it changes direction, so the angle of the refraction, and that correlates to the refractive index. And it's a very easy to use tool to get a better understanding about the concentration of a specific liquid, like a urine. It has been correlated to urine osmolality as a measurement, and urine osmolality is most of the time seen as the more superior measurement. But if you look to the correlation numbers and the way it classifies, I think urine specific gravity is a very practical tool that especially sports nutritionists or athletic trainers can use in a practical situation, because it's easy to do. You can standardize it in a very good way, so you can get a very reliable measurement, and it's not expensive, and it's ready to use. So what I think is that especially for professionals, if they want to assess hydration status, they probably should use urine specific gravity, and then it's a better tool for them than urine color itself. I see urine color more as a means to add on to this measurement if they want to coach people to self-assess, for example, at home, or when they travel, or when they are on training camp or so. So I see it, urine specific gravity, for me, from a practical perspective, is a very useful tool for the practitioners to guide and counsel their athletes about, are they hydrated? And urine color is sort of the additional tool that people can use when they are at home.
Now, I was reading one of your studies, and I came across a chart that you co-developed. It's called the 7-color UC chart. Can you explain a little bit about this chart and what it was designed to do?
Yeah, I think that most people in sports are familiar with some form of a urine color chart. To be honest, if you Google urine color chart, then I think you get over 30,000 hits and a lot of pictures. And to be honest, the urine color charts in itself have been developed since, I think, the Middle Ages. But in sports, I think most people know the color chart that was developed by Lawrence Armstrong in the 90s. He published about it, a couple of papers in 94 and 98. And that's an 8-color chart. And I remember the story that he collected urine as part of his research in athletes. And at some point he looked at the samples. I think even the sunlight came through the window, and he decided to rank them on color. And he found out when he was ranking them that he saw a lot of different colors, but also a lot of similarity. So he tried to group them, and his color chart was born. And later he found out that the urine color chart correlated very well with urine osmolality and urine specific gravity. So at the same time, when I started working with these charts, I found out that the assessment on itself is not optimal. Most of the time we find between, let's say, 75% and 90% accurate classification for urine concentration, if we want to classify a sample, urine sample as high versus a low urine concentration. So it's not optimal. And I wanted to improve that. And I thought, what if we try to base the color chart not on color itself, but take the starting point of the urine concentration. So I collected roughly 100 urine samples. I measured the concentration, and then I classified them in 7 different categories for their concentration. And then I sort of color matched the colors that were in those samples. And that was how this 7-color chart was born. And together with Dean Bacalso, who was a design professor at ASU at that time, we made the transfer from having those real urine colors pictures that we had to the actual digital or let's say the formal color codes that we later on produced and validated.
That's extremely fascinating. I'm just curious, how long did that process take from, I guess, collecting the samples to creating that new chart?
Yeah, so I think the samples were collected during one of the first studies that I performed at ASU. So I came, I think, in 2017. So I think we did it in the spring of 2018, and that was when I started to work on the color chart. But it started with making pictures, making a sort of pilot chart, and overall, I think, yeah, it took over 2 years before we really had the final chart as we have now, and that we used it as part of one of the studies that we published in, I think it was in 2020. So yeah, a 3-year period to do something simple as this.
Fascinating. I don't know if it was the same study. It may have been. I was looking at a couple of your papers around this, and one of the most fascinating things to me, I think this was really interesting, was when you were exploring urine color, you used 4 light conditions such as halogen, fluorescent, LED panel, and LED flashlight. What was the reasoning for using those 4 different levels of lighting?
Yeah, so to be honest, it was something that we did relative recently in the process. So I was sort of intrigued by the fact that in many papers, and especially in the practical literature, you often read, if you have this type of color shade, you're fine. If it is, for example, 4 or higher, you're underhydrated, you need to drink more, or you're hypohydrated, you need to drink more. And it is often those urine color scales are used as a fixed scale model. And while I was working with my own data, I saw different results, and that was probably due to the fact that we used a slightly different design. We had smaller tubes, so therefore the volume was different. We had a higher light intensity. That was the result of that. I wanted to be able to measure at different locations with different teams, but I wanted to have a bright light condition that was sort of overruling the background light of that specific space. So I was getting very bright urine color samples, and therefore when I started to analyze the data and looking for the optimal cutoff value based on ROC analysis, I got very low cutoff values. And as a result, I started to appreciate that the urine color scale itself should be a sliding scale, and it is based on your environment, the situation, the light conditions, the light intensity, the volume that you assess. That sort of predicts where you need to put your cutoff value on your urine color chart, because if not, then we should have only one color, right? Because then it's just, is it lighter or darker than this specific color? And that's unfortunately not how it works. I have been talking with a colleague of mine, Stavros Kavouras. He's a professor at the College of Health Solutions at Arizona State University too, and we said, what if we can come up with one color, and that you can use that one color, you put it on top of your toilet, and when you pee in the bowl, that's the color that you're going to use to assess. And even in a normal restroom bowl, it doesn't work that way. We ended up with developing a urine color chart with 3 shades, because if the volume enters, the urine volume is affecting the bowl volume, the dilution factors come into play. So we really needed to come up with a different way to look at it. But long story short, I think we started to do those experiments with those light conditions to show that when you have a fixed urine color chart, that depending on the environment, you may change the cutoff value that you use to assess if someone is hydrated or not. And I think it's especially important for people at home in their own situation. If you have a restroom where it's relatively dark, then your urine color will appear much darker. So then your cutoff value will be different too. And that's something that we need to take into account.
Fascinating. I mean, just really cool. And I don't know, did you notice one of those tools that you measured when you look at different forms of lighting, was one more effective at others at helping you, or it didn't really matter?
There were some differences. What I thought that was interesting is that we had a fluorescent light that is seen normally as bright. That's what we have at our offices. That is seen as healthy light for the average American to perform their work with. And it's funny because if you look into the actual urine color that is scored, it's relatively dark. And in comparison to the halogen light condition, that was in our case was less bright, and still we had a lower urine color score. So that sort of shows that not only intensity, but also the light frequency may affect how we, with our human eye, perceive the color of the urine. So overall, we saw that fluorescent light, as seen as bright condition, we came up with the cutoff value of 4, where, for example, halogen light was 3. The LED panels that we used, way more brighter light, we saw similar cutoff values, but we saw lower urine color score. So yeah, there's definitely a difference, and we definitely need to look more into that. But I think at least what that publication can do is raise awareness of the fact that we need to take into account those things.
Excellent. So I'm looking at another fascinating component of your study. You investigated outcomes between fresh and frozen urine samples. What was the purpose of doing that? Like, did you notice a difference in outcomes between the two types?
There is a difference. So one of the things that we need to appreciate is that urine color is not color stable. Even within hours of collection, the color changes. So that means that what I can recommend to people if they want to assess urine color, because they don't have the means of urine specific gravity, for example, they should do it relatively fast. So if people want to score it themselves as part of an athletic department that they work, then they need to make sure that they make time. If you put them in the fridge, the color changes. So overall, I think in our case it was a design issue because it was hard to standardize the amount of measurements that we wanted to do for each new sample. Because if you collect a sample and you need to do all those type of measurements, that takes a lot of time. And we had a lot of samples in the freezer already that we previously collected. So we decided, let's go back, take those samples that we already collected. We know that the color may be affected by the freezing, and then go back and compare, at least from a part of those samples, their frozen score with the fresh score that we collected when we initially collected them. And that allowed us just to see if we can generalize the results that are based on frozen samples to fresh samples. And I think based on what we found is that you can do that. But the important thing here is that even though we use 30 ml tubes, so 30 milliliter tubes, that's roughly 1/3 of what normally is collected when you go and take a urine sample with the doctor. A normal standard cup is 90 milliliters. So even when we were scoring those, then we saw those higher urine color cutoff values based on our assessments of 3 and 4, where I would normally would find with unfrozen samples, with fresh samples, at least a 1 shade lower color. So, we explain that in the paper, but this is more like sort of a proof of concept. If you use frozen samples, you can still, they respond in a similar way than the fresh samples. The only thing is that the color scores are a little bit darker in this case.
Gotcha. Yeah, you've looked at a lot of different tools to measure hydration, and with that information that you collect, are you able to establish hydration protocols for athletes? Like, I know you work with ASU. Does this help maybe their sports dietitian team, or just does it help you with athletes in general? Say, based on what I've learned, here's what you need to do to minimize your risk for dehydration.
Yes, yeah, I think so. Obviously, it's work in progress. We developed one study. It was called the Cool the Fork study, because we do all kind of things with forks at ASU because we're Sun Devils. And what we did there is we created a report in which we measured at multiple days hydration status of the athletes, and we combined we took morning urine samples in combination with measuring hydration status during practice. So pre-post practice body weight, we collected their fluid intake and also the urine excretion around training situation. So we combined those two into reports, and we provided the data to the athletes, but also worked, for example, with smileys, so that if you have for example a good USG value, so a low urine concentration, but so that then you would get a nice laughing smiley. But if you would not drink enough during practice, then you would get a worried smiley there, indicating, okay, this is something that you might want to work with. And because we took multiple days, you could really see if athletes were able to consistently provide a good hydration status on the basic level based on the USG values, but also on the acute level when we were comparing body weight change over or sweat rate assessment during practice. So in that way, we developed those reports, and that's in a similar that's something that people can use and do. One of the things that I found out is that it is very time consuming. So I think if athletic departments, especially collegiate athletic departments, like that type of opportunity to educate their athletes, they need to be aware that it's very time consuming to do this type of measurements. And therefore, what I suggest is that they should partner with their nutrition departments to set up those assessment and research studies, just to allow them to connect and combine, because there's much of the things that we don't know. One of the things that we don't know is, you can measure and see how people do, but we don't really know how people actually improve their hydration status when they are indicated as, not well hydrated. We definitely need more data on that to better understand how we can improve their hydration status on the long term.
Excellent. Great information. And, we've talked a lot about different ways to assess hydration when it comes to using different tools. Now, we've talked about urine color, but let's talk a little bit about urine volume, because I read where urine volume output by an individual can also be a way to assess hydration status. Is that true? And can you explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, to some extent, I think it's true, but it is important to consider that there are many different types of thirst. And I think the type of thirst that you're targeting is osmotic thirst. So that is thirst driven by the fact that the urine is concentrated, and normally, especially you will see that when there is acute fluid loss. So we're talking about hydration, so the active loss of fluid, for example, during exercise, and normally that thirst response will occur when there's 2% body weight loss. I'm not sure if thirst really reflects hydration status when people are in a resting situation. So the thirst that people experience in the morning, for example, when they wake up, and if they want to assess baseline hydration status, I'm not sure if that is the best predictor. We have done some combination assessment in which we collected, for example, thirst. We looked at urine color. We looked at body weight change in the morning for a couple of days in a row. I don't really see much coming out of that. The only thing is, there are so many ways that you can also ask about, are you thirsty? So one of the things that we asked, if you have a glass of water in front of you, you want to drink from it, are you thirsty? Obviously, there's many different ways that you can ask people if they're thirsty, yes or no. So, but at this moment, I think from the perspective, if people are assessing if they need to drink more in general, I think if they really don't drink enough, obviously they will be thirsty, and they will be thirsty the whole day. That's a good signal. Yeah. But I don't think it is very, it's probably not a gliding scale there.
So for the athlete who may be listening to this podcast, outside of looking at maybe the color of their urine, is there anything else, any other methods on ways they can assess hydration status? Or is it, hey, when I go to the bathroom, it's clear, I'm good, it's dark, I need to drink fluids?
Yeah, in the end, it may come back to that. And that's the way how urine color charts are often used, I think, from a sort of educational perspective, that people are made aware that they need to watch it. I think what a lot of people forget is that you are not aware of is that you actually can use a urine color chart to accurately self-assess if your urine is concentrated, yes or no. But then you really need to standardize the way you measure. And in the literature, it's often said athletes should look at the urine color, but it's not said how they need to do it. If I put out papers to reviewers and I say that people should, pee in a cup and then assess their urine color in a standardized manner, I get feedback from the reviewers saying nobody's going to do this. I appreciate that thought and I appreciate their concern, but if we want to use it in the right way, then people should be educated that that's the way you need to do it. So overall, I think for the athletes that are listening, I think it's a combination of things. So it's definitely good to look at basic hydration status by looking in the morning, check the urine color. If it is straw light, probably you're fine. If it is very dark, then you didn't drink enough the day before. If you want to use it to assess the actual concentration, so is it high versus low, and are you somewhere in the middle, then you need to standardize a little bit more. And I would, I suggest to combine it, for example, with body weight measurements pre-post exercise, especially to see if over time you are not getting more and more hypohydrated, because that's something, especially what can happen when athletes return to the field at the end of the summer. They start practicing again with their team. There's a lot of athletes that start relatively well hydrated, and after 2 or 3 days, they tend to become more and more hypohydrated. And that's something that you can find out by measuring your body weight, because you also see that your baseline body weight is going down. So yeah, I think the combination is probably gold over here.
Well, you kind of, I think, answered my next question. I was going to talk about body weight is, do you feel measuring body weight before and after intense training sessions, especially, right now with the heat, it's hot, football teams are starting camps. Is this a good way to really look at and monitor hydration status and rehydration status as well?
Yeah, so I think anecdotal, I think it's good. One of the things that we need to consider is that there's also the impact of if you measure body weight and people see that they have huge losses, I think we also need to educate them how they then need to replace their losses. And that's not only, drinking half a gallon or more directly afterwards to compensate for that loss. It's more a total mindset and part of your daily habits. So if you see that people lose that amount of fluid, try to educate them that they already start drinking a little bit more during the day. Because if people start drinking those huge volumes just to compensate for their loss, it will also impact the measurements that you do around those athletes while, for example, you want them to assess their urine color, because that doesn't work anymore at that short amount of time from that perspective. So I think it comes with education as well.
Last question for you, Dr. Wardenaar. If there's one important message about hydration you would want our listeners to know, what would that be?
I think that there is a lot of focus on the impact of being dehydrated. So that is the process of fluid in a short amount of time as a result, for example, of exercise and maybe being under heat stress. There's not that much focus on the fact that being well hydrated may have maybe also an optimal situation. And nowadays, more and more data is coming out in which people, show that when you have a low urine concentration, for example, mood state seems to improve. And there is some pilot data that we are working on in which we hope to show that even exercise performance can be impacted by that optimized hydration. So that's the other way around. We all know that if you don't drink enough, that your exercise capacity or your performance will be reduced at some point. But now the other way, if you maintain your fluid needs in a good way and you try to optimize the amount of fluid that the body needs to make sure that it is in a well hydrated state, can you then also positively impact your performance? And that's something that I think we will learn more about. But based on the things that I've seen, for example, about cognition and mood, there's already something there, and probably in relation to the immune system too. So alongside with the fact that if you are checking your urine color and you want to assess urine concentration, that you need to standardize how you measure. The other takeaway thing is that be mindful that it may not always be about how much you lose, but maybe how much you can optimize your hydration stats.
Excellent. Fantastic content, fantastic podcast. But you're not done yet, because I have some curveball questions for you. That one of these I ask every single guest because I'm a music junkie, so I'm always curious. But one I wrote down, and I'm like, hopefully this is not going to be too hard for you to answer, just because it's going to put you on the spot. But first question is music related. If you could be the lead singer of any band, who would that be?
Yeah, that's a good one. I recently listened to a lot of music from Jack Johnson.
Okay.
And I got acquainted with his music when I was interning at the University of Texas at Austin. I think it's 10 years ago. No, it's more. It's already 16 years ago, I think, sort of that. And I always refer to it as barbecue music, the music that you want to have when you are barbecuing. I like both.
Yeah, he's great for that barbecue, that beach. You're on the water, you're relaxing. It's definitely soothing and comforting, and he's got a great style. Okay. I know you're in the Netherlands right now, hiking and vacationing with your family. So, and you work in Arizona. What would you prefer, the Netherlands or Arizona?
Definitely Arizona.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, because obviously it is very hot during the summer months. And when I was doing my job interview, they all said, it's only 3 months and after that it's done, which is not really true, because actually it's certainly 4 months and sometimes 4.5. But the rest of the year, it's such nice weather. Arizona only has 12 rain days a year, especially that where we are. So there's, it's always, the sky is blue and it's nice. And to be honest, finally, the type of work that I do, the ability to look into hydration assessment, there's really a need for that, especially when you are in that hot environment. So it makes my work way more meaningful while I try to implement the results towards the community that we work with.
That's great. That's an interesting observation. And, that's really good to know that your work is pretty much, where you are in that environment, and the environment makes your work a lot easier. So that's very, very cool. Yeah, no, I think we get all the rain here in Louisiana in 1 month that you get all year. So it's probably good that you have that control. All right. Last question for you. What's one thing about you that very few people know about? So it could be something you enjoy, something you've accomplished, anything really, rare that very few people, that you've told very few people, or they know, that maybe most of us don't know about you.
Yeah. So, and as soon as I tell it, it's not a secret anymore, right?
That's true.
So I think that what many people don't know about me is that I was, while I was in college, I was the lead singer in an old style Dixieland band. Mm-hmm. So I was performing Dixieland style swing, so jazz.
Really? That's fantastic, because that's my kind of little hidden secret in my profession. I was the lead singer of a 90s alternative cover band. So when you said that, I was like, no way, that's fantastic. We kind of have the same kind of little things that most people don't know about. At least my friends know, a lot of people that I grew up around, but no one in my profession really knows about that, just because I don't talk about it anymore. So very cool. Dr. Wardenaar, thank you so much for your time today. Fantastic content and information talking about urine status, urine color, and hydration.
Thanks for having me. Always a pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. And we look forward to having you maybe back on in the near future, talking about once, outcomes from that dietary supplement safety study. We'd love to learn more about that.
Always happy to come on, and thanks for having me.
Well, that's it for today's show. Thanks for listening to the All Me podcast from the Taylor Hooten Foundation, a nonprofit organization leading a national campaign to enlighten people to the truths about appearance and performance-enhancing substances and inspiring people to live and compete without the use of these substances. Please be sure to subscribe to our podcast and tune in to our next episode.